Mhm.
Yes, recording is going. Yes, please continue,
Okay.
Professor. Sorry for kind of
Yeah, I'm
unexpected
sorry for
situation.
the interruption. Yeah. So I was saying that Abdul Hakim Haqqani, for example, has written a book or books about how the system should be governed. And he makes it very clear in the beginning that for him and for the Taliban movement, the basic theological framework within which the movement would operate would be
Mm.
Hanafi school. So, at a very basic level, I think if anyone wants to understand where the Taliban are coming from, like I said, the Hanafi school in itself, obviously there are differences within it, but the Taliban would like the world to see them as part of, like I said, that school.
Yeah, thank you. You mentioned a couple of very interesting points, especially about the plurality and the singularity of the moment. And on that note, I would like to ask further questions, and then I need your further elaboration on, for example, how Western society and Western the general academicians and policymakers view Taliban as a singular
Mhm.
word, singular word. So, which means, do
Mhm.
you think so? This approach can also represent their Western the point of view in terms of viewing Taliban as a consolidated political entity in Afghanistan, or it is just the
Mhm.
the misunderstanding or difference, or just the result of misunderstanding what's going on in Afghanistan, what's going on, the practices Taliban is taking, or just the language difference, the result of the language differences.
Right. So, I mean, as far as I understood your question. To my mind, the question is whether the Western academia or Western media, I suppose, their emphasis on the Taliban as a monolithic, as a singular movement, or the
Yes.
plurality within the movement. I'd say so. Sometimes people ask whether the Taliban government would collapse. And so I'm taking a different approach to your question. So yeah, just excuse my segue. And I say I wouldn't know whether the Taliban government would collapse or wouldn't collapse. Afghanistan
Yes.
has been proven to be very precarious country to rule. Although there have been long stretches of stability as well, but in the recent past we've seen that it's very difficult to rule. But what I tell people is that Taliban have an advantage that the previous governments did not have. Like the Mujahideen, for example, after the fall of or the withdrawal of Soviet Union, did not have that advantage. And that advantage is that Taliban are a much more centralized movement than the Mujahideen ever were. Right? The
Oh.
Mujahideen were so many groups, they had so many leaders, and these Mujahideen at the end they ended up fighting with each other. Anyone who knows the history of Afghanistan during the 1990s would know that the what we came to know as warlords were basically Mujahideen commanders who just we called them 5 years prior, we called them Mujahideen, and 5 years later we called them warlords, right? So it was the same people. Just I think the Western media did not want to now say that these were the same people that they had associated themselves with in the name of Mujahideen for so long, that these are now the same people who are committing brutalities in their country, right? So there was no centralization. The advantage that the Taliban had, that they had a whole parallel governance mechanism, even while Hamid Karzai and Ashraf Ghani were ruling the country. The Taliban were ruling large parts of the country, the Pashtun villages at least, and they had their own court system. They had their own so many commissions that were working still, right? So they and all of these people would report to the next commander over them, and then the next commander going all the way to Mullah Umar, and then Mullah Akhtar Mansour, and then eventually Mullah Haibatullah, who is now the Taliban Amirul Momini. So that's how the system, like singular monolithic movement. Now, variations in ideology. There are some people, like I said, who are more closer to the Devbandi Fikr, the Devbandi Fiqh, And if you look at the Pashtun region within Afghanistan, you would see that there are some in the east, which is Kandahar, which is the Taliban's base of power. And then you have some in the south, which is the greater Paktia, which is closer to the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan. Now, these variations obviously create different kind of approaches to religion and the policies that they're adopting. So what I would say to your question would be that the Taliban movement is very much a centralized and monolithic movement when you talk politically. There is a single Amirul Momineen. He has a shura. He has a council of what you might call advisors, and they have a single government to which there's a caretaker prime minister, and you have a minister for defense, and which is Mullah Yaqub, and you have the interior minister, which is Siraj Haqqani. So you will have all of this, which is very centralized. But then you dogmatically, from a religious belief point of view, you would say that they all of them, like I said in my previous response, all of them would say that they adhere to the Hanafi mazhab. But within Hanafi mazhab, you would see that there are different practices. The extent of, for example, the extent of mysticism that they approve of, tasawwuf that they approve of, would be, for example, different from different people. The interpretation of, for example, where around that. And we would talk about it. I'm sure this would be one of the later discussion that would, I suppose, need greater elaboration. But politically, yes, they're a singular unit.
Yes, the politically singular, but in terms of their practices and their interpretation of Islam, the group is more kind of decentralized, right? Can we just simplify it as a single sentence?
Yeah,
yes,
but like I said, within the Hanafi again.
Exactly. So very interesting. Let's talk about a little bit how so we can speak about the Taliban's, how they behave, how they practice their policies and their the Islamic rules mixed with traditions and everything. But it is interesting to look at the Taliban, not just what Taliban is actually doing, but sometimes the perception of other people or other regions or other countries of Taliban also needs to be discussed and needs to be analyzed. So in terms of Western approach towards Taliban and differentiating their practices of Islam with some of their actions being terrorist related or things, do you think the complexity of Islamic practice of Taliban is well understood in the Western audience?
So, I mean, I would now at least try to publicize my own work. It's just like self-promotion, I think, a little bit is needed from time to time. So I think in my bio, you mentioned a lot of things and a lot of things which are not necessarily even relevant to this. But one thing that I'd like to say, and I think I'll keep coming back to this, is that I'm expecting for my book on the Taliban to be in the market, inshallah, the next month or so. And the way I start the book is exactly with the anecdotal evidence of where when I was in the US, I read a couple of books about the Taliban.
Yeah.
And when you read about the Taliban in the Western academia, and these books came from very reputed publishers, from very reputed professors. And so, for example, one thing that they said was that the Taliban were shocked by the openness of the Afghan society when they went back as refugees from Pakistan. And so, because Pakistan has no women, Pakistan has no cinemas, Pakistan, in this book, that's what the book says. And therefore, when they went back and the Afghan society was an open society, they went into a shock, and therefore they became the Taliban. And so this might sound stupid to you, and I think it is stupid to a degree. But this is how the Western academia has simplified the understanding of Taliban. The other interesting thing that book said, and I've referenced it in my book, is that the Taliban could not speak Pashto. They only spoke Urdu. Urdu being the national language of Pakistan, which is not true at all. The Taliban still speak Pashto, most of them.
Yes.
Even some Pakistani Pashtuns struggle with Urdu, and the Taliban. So this is the unfortunately the Western level of understanding. Much of it comes from works like The Kite Runner, where like you juxtapose the Taliban with Nazi movement, and now this is your understanding there. The Taliban
Yes.
of Hitler and Nazis, which I think the Taliban did a lot of things which are not I think morally or principally accepted in today's age. But I don't think they're Nazis. I don't think that understanding is helpful academically. That's my point. My point is not that they're any better or worse than anyone. That's not my point. My point is that that's unfortunately has been the Western understanding of Taliban. Now, just to give you a last example, maybe to clarify this point, is that a few months ago, New York Times wrote a report on Sirajuddin Haqqani, who is
Yeah.
now the head of the what America used to call Haqqani Network. He is the interior minister now of Afghanistan, but also the head of the Haqqani Network, which was really infamous during the war on terror, and America kept coming at Pakistan for harboring the Haqqani Network. And now suddenly New York Times writes a report on Siraj Haqqani, and it says that Siraj Haqqani is actually a moderate within the Taliban.
Yes.
Right. So, and you can go back and you can read, and it's like he's the champion of girls' education within the Taliban. So that's the problem, like I said, with Western media and Western academia, that for them, they usually fall to what you call narrative fallacy. And narrative fallacy is that everything
Exactly.
has to fit a neat narrative. So if you're
Yes.
evil, then you're evil in all ways. I don't have to understand you in any way. I don't have to understand your motivations. I don't have to understand where you're coming from. The narrative says that you're evil for evil's sake. Now that is okay with, like I said, for maybe if you're making movies, if you are maybe creating propaganda. But this is not, I think, how academia should operate. And this is, I think, where the Western academia at least has fallen short, in my opinion. Many of it, I'm not saying that all of them, but I think many of them have fallen short in this.
Yes. Thank you. Very nicely put and elaborated. And yeah, of course, I think that's not just as you rightly mentioned, about let's not just generalize the Western, but it's almost the case for many the academic community around the world. But when it comes to specific topic that you mentioned about Taliban and the perception of Taliban, it is actually the case. Unfortunately, is going on in the far part of the world from the region, let's say. Yes, very interesting. And I would like also ask you about the some of the practices they've been taking for the last, I think, the 3+ years by the Taliban government in terms of their relationship with human rights in Afghanistan, human/women rights in Afghanistan. So, to what extent does that practice represent the true Islam? Or let me put the question another way. So, let's say in percentage, we cannot say for sure the percentage level and how much there are the level of traditions when it comes to kind of practicing this the legislation, let's say in Afghanistan, or what's the level of religion of Islam, or what's the level of traditions there?
Asked me the initial question, and where we were talking about the religious dogma within the Taliban, I should have mentioned that the Taliban, when you get to the point, the Taliban do not only follow what you call the Islamic teachings or dogma or Hanafi school. There is an element of Pashtun traditionalism that you see within the Taliban.
Yeah.
And some of the practices, or I would say all of the practices, are in part then influenced also by what you might call Pashtun Wali. Now, Pashtun Wali is traditionally called the Pashtun life, honor, and honor defined in terms of women's bodies is very big in that part of the world, and therefore that comes into contact with the Hanafi idea or the Islamic idea of where, like I said, you might see in terms of the ask me how closely wouldn't be able to answer the question just because number one, I'm not a scholar of Islam. So I wouldn't say this. I can give you a different kind of a take on this question. So OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Countries, and I'm sure you know, or Organization of Islamic Cooperation. I do not know the current name of. I'm blanking on that. But OIC sent a delegation of ulama from all over the Islamic world to Afghanistan. Now, these were all distinguished ulama. So you have people from Jamia Azhar, you have people from Saudi, you have people from Tunisia, and many of them were grand muftis or of all of these countries. So, in the great religious authority, great theological authority within the not only their own country but in the Islamic world. So OIC sent these people to talk to the Taliban about what? To convince them that Islam does not prevent women from receiving education, right?
Sure.
And you would know that the women's preventing girls from education is only a problem in the Muslim world. It is only a problem in Afghanistan. And there are about 56, 57 Muslim majority countries in the world. And this is the only country where that practice is taking place. So you would say that that is a question of the Taliban's interpretation of Islam. You can say that is a question of whether the Taliban prioritize, they prefer the Pashtun rural traditionalism or how they see it over Islam. But I do not think that that is how most religious scholars from around Islam, I just mentioned to you some of them, that I don't think that that's how they see the Islamic interpretation. So that's one part. And then you talk about human rights. I believe the same goes for human rights. In most Muslim countries right now, I think are either republics or they're electoral democracies. Most of them. Some of them are kingdoms in the Middle East, but most of them, like I said, they're either electoral democracies or they're republics. And most Islamic scholars who live in these countries, who spend their lives in these countries, are fine with these systems being run like that. So exactly. I wouldn't say that again. So again, I wouldn't say that this is mainstream Islamic ideas, but I think this is their interpretation of how they see Islam.
Yes, that's great. And also a very interesting thing in terms of understanding the Taliban's the ruling practice in Afghanistan, I would say some of their practices is directed or channeled towards kind of consolidation of their rule in Afghanistan. And in generally, you could see the elements of like, you know, the consolidating the nation state in Afghanistan. But I was wondering, so to what extent the Taliban's the consolidation of power in Afghanistan, or kind of similarly similar to the nation state building endeavors in Afghanistan, kind of let's say violates or goes beyond the understanding of Islam, for example, when it comes to governing the particular region within certain particular boundaries. So where I am kind of leading the discussion towards to what extent Taliban can endanger their let's say endanger their neighbors in terms of kind of spreading their ideology or ideas regarding their rules in Afghanistan, regarding Islam beyond their territories. I mean, is it a danger for regional countries, a serious danger for the regional countries, or it's just kind of, and of course, considering their relationship with Al-Qaeda, the previous relationship with Al-Qaeda. So to what extent Do you agree with that statement, or that type of kind of scaremongering, let's say?
Mhm. Right. This is very interesting. Um, so the rhetoric within the Taliban movement in the beginning gave this sense to people that this might be part of a global jihad. And like you said, because of the relations with Al Qaeda, again because Al Qaeda was seen as more of a global jihadi organization,
Yes,
not even a global, a transnational, because it did not recognize its international boundaries. The Taliban, since they've come to power, they have always tried to convince everyone that they at least at this point in time, or at least for the foreseeable future, they have no intention of interfering into the affairs of any other country.
exactly.
Now, I'll say, I'll again give you a couple of examples. So you would know that since 2015 and 2016, the ISKP, which is the Daesh in what is called Khorasan province, which is Afghanistan, Pakistan, this region, it's been active in this region. And one of the reason of falling out of some Taliban leaders, and they went to ISKP, was on this point. So the first leader of ISKP, his name was Hafiz Saeed Khan. He was the Taliban commander in the Orakzai region in Pakistan, and he became the chief of ISKP, Hafiz Saeed Khan. And he said he called the Taliban nationalist Taliban. And he said that he left that organization because he believed that the Taliban had limited their struggle only to Afghanistan. And therefore, he believed that since the struggle cannot be limited to one country, because, like you said, that there is this idea that this is like a global jihad.
Dr. Amer, can I just ask you?
Sure. Yes, so what I was saying was that with the Taliban, I think since they've come into power, they have tried to convince everyone that they'll abide by the international law and the nation state system within which we exist, and that their struggle was primarily for power in Afghanistan. Now, this has, like I said, a couple of problems. One, the Taliban lost some of its people to the ISKP, which is the Daesh Khorasan province, right? The
Yes,
first leader, for that reason, the first leader of Daesh in this region was Hafiz Saeed Khan.
yes.
Um, and Hafiz Saeed he was a Taliban leader in the Orakzai region in Pakistan. And
Hmm.
he joined Daesh because he said the Taliban were now a nationalist Islamist Taliban,
Oh,
by which he meant that the Taliban had limited their struggle only to the Afghanistan and to a degree maybe to some regions in Pakistan, and they had given up on their global struggle, and therefore they were not authentically jihadist movement, at least with in the mind of this Daesh leader. So there is one caveat that we should keep in mind, that there was a tension at least at that point in the movement, and some of these people who went to Daesh were people who were more of this mindset. The other thing that we should remember is that, in particular with regard to Pakistan, this challenge of maintaining the Taliban rule or the Taliban movement only to Afghanistan would be a little bit problematic when it comes to Pakistan. Number one, because the the people, Pashtuns, especially on the Pakistani side of the border, were very heavily involved in the movement in Afghanistan. They
exactly.
assisted, they assisted the Taliban. Many of them fought together. When the Taliban were under pressure from the American forces, they came and they received from the local population. They received safe havens in these regions. Now, some of these people have then continued their fight against the Pakistani state in the name of, for example, the TTP, the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan.
Exactly, yes.
Now this has become a problem for the Afghan Taliban. If they give up on these people, they are afraid that. So, for example, if tomorrow the international powers again turn on the Afghan Taliban, where would they go if they've lost these comrades to the Pakistani state now? Or, for example, if there is a revolt within the Taliban's own ranks in favor of these people, And maybe people, let's say, they form their own organization and they start fighting against the Taliban for not supporting this movement in Pakistan. Or maybe some of them go and join Daesh and then they fight against the Taliban. What would that happen? So with regard to Pakistan, I think it's a little more complicated. But when it comes to other countries, I don't think that the Taliban, as things stand, they've shown any intention. So I'll just give you one last example. When the war in Gaza started in October 2023, and then Israel attacked Gaza, and this became a very touchy subject, a very emotional subject for Muslims around the world. And now the Afghan government, that the Taliban government, it calls itself the Amarat Islami. It's in their leader is Amirul Mu'mineen. He's not Amirul Muslimin
Afghani or
Afghan.
Afghan, yes.
Right. So he's Amirul Mu'mineen. So some people spread this thing on social media where they said that the Afghan Taliban have stated that if they're given passage by some of these Muslim countries to Gaza or to Palestine, they would go and they would fight Israel. This was on the social media.
Yes.
And the Afghan government, the Taliban government actively went and denied such an intention.
Yes.
They said that they did not make such statement. So this, for me, indicates more than anything else. If they said they would not interfere into the internal affairs of any other country. And not many Muslims in the world believe that Gaza is an internal, not many countries believe that Gaza is an internal matter of Israel, right? But for someone to say that, it shows you the level of care and caution that they're exercising in not showing to the world that they have any intention of interfering. If they're saying that they have no intention of interfering into the matters of Israel, why would they say that they would interfere into the matters of, let's say, Uzbekistan or Tajikistan? But like I said, Pakistan is a different picture. Like I said, it's a whole set of different challenges. But that's my response to that.
Yes, very interesting. But so your point is, I mean, that's a strong evidence, in my opinion, to regard Taliban being kind of a regional or national movement or national the entity or political force within certain boundaries. But again, so considering the Taliban, Pakistan, I mean, the Afghanistan-Pakistan relations you mentioned earlier, that there are also the strong evidences or just indications that in the future the Taliban behave differently in terms of the source of danger or if the source of danger is beyond their boundaries, like beyond regions, for example, from Gaza and out long distances, it might kind of react differently. When it comes to the neighboring countries, it might act in a different way. So that's why I would say, as analytics, we say just the future is always uncertain. So we cannot say for sure or state for sure that Taliban will strictly remain as a national.
I'll say another thing. The Taliban, I think the word that I like to use is not that they're compliant with international norms.
Exactly.
It is that they are being very cautious and careful so that others would not see the Taliban movement as an anti-system movement.
Exactly.
Because no one wants to interact with an anti-system movement. So they might do what they might do when they are more consolidated. But at this point in time, they realize that as a governing country, so America and China and Russia and Pakistan and India, all have their differences with how to approach Afghanistan. But all of them want a system power to be in Afghanistan. No one wants an anti-system, like an anti-Australian system power in Afghanistan. So that's where, like I said, they recognize their limitations.
Exactly.
Both in terms of, like you said, reaching Gaza, or in terms of annoying their neighbors. So, and this is politically very savvy as well. I think this is politically interesting because if you do not pose a danger to Tajikistan, for example, you can ask Tajikistan not to host NRF leaders, right? If you pose no danger to Iran, you can ask Iran to pacify Ismail Khan, right? So I think they also, you have to keep this in mind, that they're dealing with danger, but they're trying to deal with danger in a different way.
Exactly. So we can say just the Taliban's the domestic and foreign policy more relaxed, right? The
Right.
depending on the danger or depending on or let's say a threat or challenge, and how they perceive the challenge, they might react accordingly, right?
Right.
So very interesting, and I think we're gonna stop here because so the it's gonna be the long series of discussions. So for we have to leave something for the next discussions.
We should, yeah.
I
Yeah,
thank
but
you.
I think it's an interesting discussion. I think we've just, as they say, scratched the surface of this, and yeah, so we'll continue this conversation going forward.
Sure, sure. We're gonna continue next discussions. So we have so many topics that we should cover in our series regarding the Taliban's relationship with their neighbors, regarding the consolidation of the power, or other things we should
Right,
address.
right.
Unfortunately, we cannot pack everything into small discussions, and it's going to be the kind of a right thing to continue.
Mhm.
So I'm going to stop here, and I thank you so much for agreeing on this interview and collaboration.
Thanks so much, Hamza, for having me. And we'll, like you said, we'll continue.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Bye.